Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webinar. My name is Gary Allen. I'll be your host today. Um, as you may notice, we've got something a little bit different going on. I am not a cat, and I am not a cat lawyer, but we'll talk more about that later. I'm very excited to welcome Jared Correa to the webinar today, our talking fox.
Hello.
Welcome, Jared.
Unlike you, I am an actual fox. I just
Oh,
want people
okay.
to know that.
Yes. Okay. Well, let's now that is clear. So we've got a little bit of a lighthearted thing going today, but we're going to give you some good insights, deadly serious insights about how to make your law firm more profitable. So let's dive into that.
Do it. Tell me if or when you want me to turn my avatar off, but I'm enjoying it.
Yeah.
Look
No,
at
let's keep it. We definitely have
look at the
the
smart
initial
blazer I'm wearing
segment.
right now.
Yeah, well, foxes are just good looking by nature, so
Yeah, this one
run with
dresses
it.
better than me.
So this webinar is part of our Best in Class Law Firm series that we offer credit to Association of Legal Administrators members. So those of you who are ALA members can take advantage of that. If you're not an ALA member and you are an legal administrator, I encourage you to join this organization. It creates a great community for people who do what you do, and it is also has some great information always available, and actually a CLM certificate of legal management, so that you can be an accredited legal manager. So just let me talk a little bit about me, the real me. Um, so I learned a lot about law firm profitability the hard way. So graduated from Stanford Law, had no business education whatsoever, like just about every lawyer I know. And within the first few years of my practice, I experienced two implosions of firms. And the last one left me with no job on a Saturday afternoon and a 6-month-old baby to feed. So I was really fortunate to land in a really well-run firm after that. And I learned a lot about some relatively simple things that can help make law firms more profitable. So I well, all of that has given me a real passion to help law firms become better, because not only did I make a lot more money after I landed in my firm, I was a lot happier. And I want that for everybody in the profession. And we're excited to uh, have Jared Correa join us. This is his avatar picture here when he's, trying to pretend that he's not a fox. Um, and
Yes. It's a
Jared
long
has a
running ruse.
Jared has a kind of similar background to mine. He was a practicing lawyer for a while before he became a law firm consultant. Now he's got worldwide practice and is a well-known legal tech expert, featured in a bunch of ways. You also have a software company, if I'm not mistaken, right? Right, Jared?
So we've got okay, so I've been as a as an ornery fox, I've got a lot on my plate. I sold a software company recently, and I
Oh,
am working
congratulations.
on, thank you, thank you. And I am working on a media company as my next venture, soon to
Oh,
be announced.
fantastic. You didn't learn your lesson from your first adventure in
I'm I'm not very bright, contrary to your average fox.
So we've
But
got some in.
most of this is correct.
Awesome. So yeah, Jared's got some really great content on the web. He's a frequent writer and speaker, and here's how you get in touch with him if you're interested in any of his services. All right, so we're going to just jump into some big topics about profitability, and pretty much everything in the legal space is starting with AI now. So let's start with some AI, and what could possibly go wrong. And
What could possibly go wrong?
what
We've
could
got questions about
possibly
the. We've already got questions about the avatars. I took my avatar off. Hi, this is the real me. Hello. I think Lori is like, what the hell is going on here? So, hi, Lori.
Yeah,
By the way,
this
may I
is
say
not an
before we
AI
jump into
generated
this?
webinar. And
Yes.
just to prove it, I will take my avatar off as well.
Oh, I just increased my credibility. Excellent. I felt like I was more credible as an animated fox, but that's all
Yeah,
right.
I know. I know.
Um,
Well, just as our first example of what could possibly go wrong,
that can go
you
wrong.
you might all remember. I trust most of you remember this incident. So this was back in the early days of COVID, and this is an actual screenshot from an actual Zoom court hearing uh, when uh, our poor attorney discovered that his avatar was turned on. And that's a pretty darn good avatar, I must say. Uh,
Yeah,
and he
I'm
didn't
I'm
know
I'm
how to turn it
impressed.
off. So he had to tell the court that he was, not a cat and that he was a lawyer, which I think is probably a pretty bad sign when you're starting your argument with those
Right,
things.
right. The judge was not happy, clearly.
No, I can
Um,
imagine. Well, look at the looks on the counsel's faces here.
I mean, Jerry Phillips is just like, thank God it's not me.
Yeah,
Like that's what he's
yeah,
thinking.
exactly. Like, well, and there's a little bit of like, I can't quite believe what I'm seeing.
Oh, I know. I mean,
And
that'd be kind of crazy in a courthouse setting to see, well,
yeah,
virtual courthouse setting to see that.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, exactly. And it's funny, and unless you think about yourself as the cat lawyer. So
yeah. Funny for
yeah,
everybody but the cat lawyer. I have to
yeah.
say, like, the most viral tweet I ever had was about the cat lawyer. Like people were
Well,
so into this when it happened.
yeah. Oh, well, I couldn't get enough of it. So what did
I
you
the
say?
Well, oh, I forget what I said. I was like, oh, something about like, look at this guy. Forgot to put his filter off or whatever. Just, I was among the crass group of people who were like, point and laugh. But I
Well,
also like the way I look at it too is what. So the story that came out behind this was that he had an admin person who was working for him,
mm-hmm,
and she had access to all his stuff. And so that admin person's kid was the one who actually put on the cat filter, and then
mm-hmm.
he didn't know how to turn it off, and she didn't know how to turn it off. So problem number one is using the technology, but problem number two, like people don't think of it this way, but that's you don't want to give someone access to
Right,
that level of control over your
right.
systems.
Either that or you need to hire the kid.
Yeah,
Yeah,
hire the
because the
kid.
kid would have known
Definitely.
how to turn it off.
I think he was in kindergarten at the time, though. I think he was like a little kid who was messing
Oh,
around with the filter.
yeah, yeah. Okay. Well, let's get a little more serious about this. And
Wait, I thought this was serious. Okay.
oh, well, kind of,
I thought this was a serious part.
kind of. Yes. Well, the way I put this one in the category of context is everything. Because the cat filter could be a wonderful thing if you're trying to keep the attention of a kindergarten class as a
Yes.
as a Zoom teacher. Um, but AI, the AI that's behind this doesn't know whether you're in a court hearing or in a kindergarten class.
Right.
Uh,
Yes.
so, you know, that that's that's one way that this can go very wrong. AI is smart and amazing in so many ways. I mean, this is a really cool avatar.
Yeah.
But then in other ways, it's just as dumb as it comes. So, do
I
you have
mean,
other thoughts about what can go wrong with AI?
oh yeah, so many. I'll
Yeah.
just say, like off the top, you were talking about ALA. I will say, great organization that I've worked with in the past. They
Hmm.
do tremendous work. So, if you're a legal administrator, you're not part of that organization, I would definitely get around to doing that.
Yeah.
Um,
We love ALA.
yes. So I think it's sort of like a stewardship thing when it comes to AI as an attorney
Hmm.
in a couple different ways. Like one of the things I think you need to do is, and I was talking to somebody about this earlier today, is if you're going to adopt and use technology as a lawyer, you have to be able to understand it and how it works. And so the fact that you get into a court hearing and you have a cat avatar, like that's cool if you can turn it off immediately. But the problem was like this guy had no clue how to change it, so he's a cat the entire time, and you just look like a moron, frankly. The other part of it is the supervision part of it, which this entails also. Like you got staff, you got to supervise them, you got to make sure that they don't have access to the wrong. Like people think of unauthorized access as like, what if someone from outside the firm gets access to my stuff? But there's
Right,
also the question about what about the people inside the firm? Do they have access to the right things? Should they have access to all these things? Like you don't want everybody on the firm being an admin on your software, for example. And functionally,
right,
that's what happens here. And the last thing I'll
right.
say is like one of the issues with AI is from an ethics standpoint, from a logistical standpoint, it's not like normal software. It's not like using a productivity software. So it's more like a person than it is like a software because you can talk to it, you can instruct it to do things. In some cases, when you're using AI agents, they'll do things on your behalf and it won't
Mhm.
need extensive permissions to do that. It won't need you to interact with it constantly. And to me, like that is a really challenging thing for attorneys because controlling this is difficult in the best of circumstances. And then in a business where you've got ethics responsibilities tied to your use of the technology, it becomes even harder. So you really have to think about like, how do I supervise AI like it was an associate attorney or like it was a paralegal on my team?
Mhm.
And then how do I get my team to interact with it? So you also probably want to think about an AI usage policy for the firm if one doesn't already exist.
Yeah, good points. Good points all. I'm going to take it back kind of to kindergarten level, just
All
uh,
right.
just because I started with the cat lawyer picture.
Yeah, that's fair.
So, and probably most of you know this, but one of the problems you've got with AI, and one of the things that can go wrong is hallucination. That it will likes to sound confident and but it can be very wrong. Even no matter how confident it is, it'll tell you something that sounds like it's fact and it's just not. And I expect there are first year associates who are like that. That they might not last too long as lawyers. I
Right.
I remember one judicial clerk who definitely fit that mold. That was an appeal that was required that we won. Uh, so yeah, you've got the hallucination problem, and one of the aspects of that is all the fake cases that you see, which I mean I've seen some really big time law firms that have gotten dinged for submitting briefs with fake cases in them. And, that was, I don't know where they learned how to research, but, you know, uh, the, my policy was I read every case in my brief and I read every case in the brief, in every case that was cited in those cases, and sometimes even a level down from there, because if you really want to know what's going on, you have to have that level of understanding. But if you just, crank out a brief and say this looks good without doing that checking, you get what you deserve,
Right.
in my opinion, because that's, that used to happen just by people cutting and pasting from other briefs and things weren't quite right. But now it's like, it's much worse. You have, Judge Dumbledore opinions that show up. Uh, and
Has that one come out? Has there been a Judge Dumbledore opinion? Is that real?
I
I haven't
I
seen
don't
that.
I haven't heard
I
that
mean, I could totally
specifically,
see
but
that happening.
yeah, no, I could see that happening. No, but it's it's a metaphor, right? Um, and the one thing I wanted to talk about, which I'm kind of learning in my own business, is AI is really good at producing tons of content. But it
Right.
can also, and if that's directed in the right way, that can be extremely valuable. But you can also find yourself up to your neck in garbage. If you don't know how to do prompts and really, you know, just don't do scattershot approach, you're gonna have more problems than you solve by using AI. But in the right context, it can be really amazing.
Oh yeah.
So it's very powerful, but you know, don't get caught like the cat lawyer or whatever the new iteration of that is going to be. And you mentioned AI agents. I
Yeah.
think it's going to be a while before law firms should really be using AI agents too much. A large level of supervision
Yeah, you think
is
they're going to screw that up too?
I do. Yeah, I could definitely see that. Yeah. So I did, kind of want to turn this around a little bit and talk about, all right, now we know all the dangers and we've scared everyone on the call away from ever using AI. But wait a minute, there are some real opportunities here. So I've got my own ideas, but tell me what you see as the best uses of AI for a law firm that they can do today.
Yeah, if we're not talking about agents, which makes sense at this point, although I think a lot of law firms are utilizing those, at least in the testing
Yeah.
capacity. And
Hmm.
like, I mean, I'm okay with stuff in a sandbox environment and trying it out. Um, I think one of the best use cases for AI is kind of removing the rote work that's done in a firm and
Hmm.
upskilling employees. I mean, one of the big issues with AI is you're telling your staff potentially to start using more AI, or the firm's going to start implementing more AI. And what's the first thing they're going to be thinking about? Oh, well, the AI is going to replace me. So I think you really have to be thoughtful about the use cases. And if you're telling people, like, hey, we're going to start using AI, you have to have an idea of what their jobs are going to be post the uses of AI. So, what are some of the use cases? Like document drafting and document revising, I think is a really great use case for
Hmm.
AI. That's all done on the backside of the law firm. That can save people a bunch of time. That's relatively straightforward and easy to utilize and interact with. So that's one that I like. Um, the other thing is like, you know, data management. And I know we'll talk more about data before we're finished here, but like one of the problems with law firms is like collating information, making it transparent to people. And AI is great when it comes to coming up with valuable metrics. Some big
Hmm.
companies like Uber, for example, are using AI to talk to each other to develop metrics that they would not have thought of. So I like that use case as well. Surfacing data, that's another great one. Another AI use case I've seen that I've liked is billing generation. So one of my clients built a billing tool on ChatGPT, basically on one of the custom GPTs, where all the billing information's set up. We've got different billing categories, and it's generating bills for him on a monthly basis using AI, and then he revises those and sends those out to clients. Those are three off the top of my head that I've seen. But I think it's true of like most technologies in general, not just AI. If you've got a lot of rote stuff you're doing that people don't necessarily love to do, it's a great way to look at it and say, oh, okay, maybe I can use a technology tool to replace this that's more human, quote unquote, than any other technology tool's been.
Right. Right. Exactly. And, just from my own experience, it, one thing I think is really important is don't push it off to the side. I mean, if you do not know anything about how AI works
Yeah,
now, and you don't have some experience using these models and queries and so on, you're going to be way behind in a hurry. So, find some way to use AI often and safely. Even if your ultimate goal is to, create boundaries around it, you need to know what it does and what it doesn't do. And there's no better way to do that than by, drop a query and some version of a large language model that's safe. Let's say that's Copilot because it's
yeah,
all within the Microsoft system. If you're not comfortable with the things you'd have to put into Chat GPT and the security of that one, the Copilot's relatively secure related
right.
to that.
You've
And
got a
you
lot of
can,
options these days that a lot of people aren't even aware of. But yeah,
yeah, yeah, exactly. But just find something, and I'm just talking about a generic use case.
yeah,
You may buy contract drafting software or something that's much more specialized, probably more expensive, but you should be able to do either, something that doesn't cost you any more than you're spending already on your software, or at least, a cheap subscription just to get to know how to use it.
Yeah.
Because it's like I use it every single day. I counted over 400 queries over the last 6 months.
Oh, wow. That's
So
pretty good.
yeah, it's and some of them are about law, some of them are about talking foxes. So
Well, that's good. Those are more
yeah.
exciting, assuredly.
So, that's one thing that is really, I think is that I've learned using it a lot lately. And as part of that, you're going to get smart about how to do prompts, because, a beginning user of a AI systems, they'll put in a basic prompt and get a basic and not very good answer and go, oh, well, this isn't very good.
Yes.
Um, but spend a little time going, how do I asking your browser or your AI tool even, what are the best practices for how to do prompts with this? Because a good prompt and good iterations of prompt can get you a long way. And that's it's going to be everybody's going to have to be skilled in this. Maybe these get easier, but you're going to have that.
And there are a
Just
lot of
one
prompt
other,
frameworks out there as well, I would tell people. Like if you're
yeah,
looking for examples. I'm telling
yeah,
my kids,
exactly,
like, go get a job as a prompt engineer. You'll be doing that for a long time.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And one thing that I thought of from my own practice is this kind of deep research I was talking about. If you've got a brief to write, rather than just you know ping chat GPT to do it, have it review the cases that are in your brief and then the ones that are cited, and have it give you a little readout on that so you can tell what's really going on. I think you could take you could probably save a lot of time there and really improve your product rather than just putting out something mediocre that's fast.
Yeah, and the brief analysis tools on these things are pretty good too, as
Yeah.
well. Like in Lexis and West, which have some of those tools as well, whether analyzing your opponent's briefs or your own briefs. So that's a good point also.
So what do you tell people about billing when they're using AI? This is something that's come up with a number of our clients, like, okay, now it takes me 1 hour to do this task rather than four
Right.
hours. Do I just give that away to the client? Or, I've created the same value. How do you price it?
This sounds terrible. This sounds like a really bad thing for lawyers, but I kind of view it as an opportunity, honestly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, I mean the term you use is interesting, like giving it away. I think that's how a lot of lawyers think of it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's only because they're kind of stuck in the hourly billing mindset. And so the thing is, like the ethics rules at this point, or the ethics opinions at this point, have kind of coalesced on this, which is that if AI makes you faster, you can't like just make up hours to cover
Right.
for it. Like if it takes you 1 hour using AI, you have to bill for 1 hour. You can't just make up 3 hours. But this is not like a new problem per se because non-AI technology has sped up lawyers' work in the past also. And if you read
Mm-hmm.
through the ethics opinions on this, I think the thing that's interesting is they're like, hey, maybe you should just do flat fee billing. Maybe it's time. And one way to look, there's only two ways to solve for that problem. So problem number one, solution number one is get more work. Like if you can do the work in an hour now, how you can do 4 times as much work. And that's easy for me to be like, yeah, go out and get more work. I know it's not as easy as that, but you've increased your work volume
Mm-hmm.
effectively. And the other way to do it is to look at alternative pricing mechanisms. So
Yeah.
flat fees, subscriptions, maybe hybrid models. That's what, if you're like, I want to do the same amount of work or I want to take on the same amount of cases more accurately and still make the same amount of money, then you have to move away from hourly billing. That's just the only way to do it.
Exactly. And, that is not just a matter of, oh, now we, reduce the price and, you know, come up with a flat fee. I think it's much more effective if you do a little design thinking in that and go, where is the
Right.
client really getting value out of this? And maybe it's just not producing the piece of paper. Maybe there's other value I can create as a trusted advisor or, providing ancillary services or whatever that create a more valuable process where they see value and will pay for that. Instead of thinking, I'm just, cranking out pieces of paper for clients.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, very different. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. I think Laurie has a good point in the chat where she basically says if you need more cases, you can also use ChatGPT to help you build a marketing plan. And
Hmm.
tools like AI tools are excellent with workflow development and
Yeah.
strategy.
Yeah. So I did a webinar with our head of revenue here at Lean Law, who's scaled a few software companies. And in an hour, we came up with a marketing plan for a law firm. That was not bad. It was really not bad.
Yeah.
So
It's funny, it
it's
doesn't take as long as you think. And, you know, I'm a business consultant for lawyers, so some people talk to me about this and they think, well, aren't you going to be out of a job? I'm like, nah, it's not that good yet. Like I'll jump into the AI with people and be like, all right, let's build out a marketing plan. And then I'm like, nah, I would change this, I would eliminate that, I would tweak
yeah,
that. So
exactly. It's
but
not it,
it's a good starting point.
but it gives you a good start. That's the thing. And it, your high level value is augmented at that point because now you can
Right.
leverage that. You don't have to spend it writing a bunch of emails or whatever. Yeah, but
Absolutely. Yeah.
interesting. Any other thoughts about AI before we move off that?
I mean, to echo your prior point, I think it's really important to try it because I think a lot of lawyers are like not ready to try it or they're doing really simple things like a very
Hmm.
basic prompt and not getting a lot out of it. So I would be thoughtful about how the prompts are written. And I thought the analogy I usually make is AI is like a little kid. It's going to lie to you. It's not going to give you the complete answer you need. I always tell people like when I talk to an AI, I try to think like after dinner, I'll tell my kids to clean up, and they won't do it unless I'm like, okay, take your plate and scrape the food into the trash and wash it off, then put it into the dishwasher. You have to talk to an AI like that. You have to be very specific about what you want.
Yeah, exactly. And then be ready for it not to understand that and have to correct it.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah. But once you get it going, if you get it on the right task, it'll do a lot more than your 5-year-old. It's a
Usually, yeah.
usually. All right, let's see what else. Oh, let's talk profitability.
Ah, yes.
So
Let's.
what is your best piece of advice to law firms about improving their profitability?
So many good ones to choose from. Um, One of the things I have lawyers focus on is like individual profit centers within the
Mm,
business. So I think this is pretty enlightening, and a lot of people don't think of it this way. But like, I think of every staff person in the law firm, billers or non-billers, as a profit center. And this is
hmm.
easier to figure out with billers. Like, I need to know like how much money am I paying, investing towards that person, and how much am I getting out of it. Most people don't look at those numbers at all.
Yeah.
And then I'll take that a step further, and if you have multiple locations as a law firm, are each of those locations a profit center for you? Because if you got three locations, there may be one office location that's really bringing in most of the business for the firm, and then the other two are kind of like sliding along. But if you can make
Hmm.
all those different offices as profitable as you can, then you're making a whole heck of a lot more money. So I try to drill down as much as possible and think, is this segment of a law firm a profit center? Because I think most people look at that holistically, and that allows you to paper over problems that you should be addressing at a deeper level.
I love that. Yeah. No, that was something my firm was really good at.
Yeah.
So
Some firms are great at it.
everybody knew if they were profitable. and everybody knew what the overhead number was. It was
Right.
on your draw sheet every month. Makes a
Well, that's
huge difference.
great. Well,
Yeah.
yeah, I like the transparent, like most people, that's sort of radical transparency for law
Hmm.
firms, at least.
Hmm.
And most people don't want to be that transparent. Most people who own law firms, but it is a highly effective way to manage things. Highly
Yeah.
effective.
Having seen both, I am a big advocate for radical transparency because it radically changes the culture in your firm in good ways.
Right.
It just
Right.
kind of rips off a lot of the distrustful band-aids that a lot of law firms have. So anyway, do it. Get all that information on the table.
Well, the other thing is like you found with individuals, like now you're accessing gamification. Nobody wants to like lose, quote unquote, and not be profitable. And then you
Hmm.
start getting people, you build up healthy competition where it's like, oh, Andrea's making that much, I can do better than that. And
Well,
then
it's interesting.
if you tie that to incentives, then you're in a really good spot.
Yeah, yeah. Well, our firm had a profit had a compensation formula, um, and it was really interesting because for most people, what it meant was, oh, thank goodness, I don't have to worry about what anybody else is making. I can just focus on my part of this, and
Yeah.
so I don't have to worry that the firm is going to go under because so and so is, soaking up all of the is not producing and is taking way too much home.
Right.
That it was self-regulating,
Yeah.
which I thought
Well,
was very effective.
that's not a bad result either.
Yeah,
But
no,
it only occurs when people get to see the information and understand
yeah,
whether they're profitable or not and to what level.
yeah. I mean, it did save a lot of uncomfortable conversations with unproductive lawyers. They
Yes.
almost never had to be escorted out the door.
Well, that's good. They're aware.
Yeah,
They know it's coming.
exactly.
You just stand near the guillotine. You'll be fine.
So the profit center, I think, is so important for a law firm. So that's a great point. So mine is that profitability is not rocket science. That you do not need a NASA dashboard in order to figure out if you're a profitable law firm. So
Yeah.
there's a certain number of law firms that kind of overdo things like that and lose sight of what's really important. So, um, and what's been amazing to me is how big a gap there is between a firm that's really well run and profitable and just average. When you look at the data numbers out there, that adds up to, and I have a whole webinar on how this is calculated, but it's about a couple $100,000 a year per lawyer difference between average and best in class.
Yeah.
Um, and so that's 8 million bucks over the course of a lawyer's career. But it always blows me away how reluctant lawyers are to dive into that if they're on the average end of that. It's like it's really hard to get people's attention around profitability, even though you would think that's one of the primary reasons they're practicing. But I
Yeah.
don't know what you've seen on that front, but um, it seems like most of the people who are willing to talk to me are already pretty profitable. The ones that are
Yeah. I
really
mean,
struggling
yeah.
are just out there struggling.
I feel like it's hard to get out of your own head when it comes to that
Hmm.
kind of thing. And I think if you already have like that profit mindset, like you're going to continue to do it and you're going to seek out people who can help you further. And I feel like some of the hardest decisions that law firms end up making are like the basic decisions around profitability. Like I
Hmm.
got to hire an attorney now, and it's a big step for me. I've never done that before. I don't know like how
Right,
effective that's going
right.
to be. Or I need to. I maybe I should start spending on marketing or advertising, but I've never done that before. I've just relied on my network forever. That's a hard thing to do. So I
Hmm.
think once people start making those decisions and they start seeing positive results and they start changing their mindset, that can be a big deal. So I'm not surprised at all that people who are already successful want to double down on their success. And people who haven't been quite as successful as they envision themselves now, I think it's just tough for them to get out of their own way. And to
Yeah.
me, it's more of a psychological thing than anything else, honestly.
Hmm. Yeah. No, it's really interesting because, it's, I think it has negative consequences for the profession in a whole lot of ways,
Oh, for sure.
because,
Yeah.
people who are not running a profitable operation, they feel pressure to bill clients and pad the hours and, do all sorts of things that you know, uh, are not helpful for their business or their relationships. Where once you're freed of that, you run a lean operation and, understand where your money's coming from, get some of
Right.
these basics right, you can create happier clients and relationships. And Lord knows the profession needs that.
Yeah. You know, most clients are not particularly thrilled with their lawyers at any given time.
Yeah.
They only
Yeah.
hear
Well,
from them when they need something. They only hear from them when they get a bill. So that's a tough angle.
yeah, I mean, ran into a very credible survey. It was done by, I want to say MIT, that talked about how different professions were perceived,
Hmm.
and lawyers came in below prostitutes. Um,
Nice.
and no offense to any of the ladies of the evening or
Apparently,
gentlemen
they're
of the
doing
evening
pretty
out there.
well.
But it seems like there might be room for improvement for the legal profession.
Yeah. And well, I don't think people view it as the interesting part of this to me is like, I don't necessarily think people even view that from a profitability standpoint. They just
Hmm.
think about customer service and how do I do better at that. But like, there are obviously ramifications that come from that. If you've got excellent customer service, it's just easier to make money. It is. So
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think that's a good point that you made. Yeah.
interesting.
Lawyers can definitely improve on that as far as I'm concerned.
Anything more on profitability?
I thought this was a pretty good discussion, frankly. And I guess I think my big thing is like the whole it not being rocket science thing is a really important thing to remember because I
Yeah.
can I'm always staggered by how little lawyers want to put numbers down. So
Hmm.
I talked to lawyers who want to hire or want to hire more aggressively. And the first thing I always say is, okay, like let's take that profit center model and then let's look, what are you paying this person? What's the billable rate going to be? How many hours do you think they can bill? And no one actually does the calculations. And I'm like, watch this. I'm going to do X rate times however many hours you want to bill this person in any given year, and then that's the amount of money you're making from them. And people are like, oh, that's amazing. I was just going to guess. So stop guessing. I'm like, that took 2 seconds. That literally took 2 seconds. It
Right,
doesn't take a lot to figure out profitability, it's just a modicum of effort. So the next time you go out and hire somebody, if you've already hired somebody, look at it in a different way. Run the numbers, run different use cases if you want to. Run an
right.
aggressive use case, run a
The
conservative
math
use case.
is just as hard as you just said. It's,
It's just multiplication. It's literally just multiplication. I think
exactly.
people see it as like, oh my God, I got to use imaginary numbers to figure out how much profit my firm is
Right.
going to make. You
It's
don't.
surely the area under a curve, so I need calculus for this.
Right. Right. And by the way, the software you're using probably has all kinds of built-in reports. So use
Exactly.
those.
Exactly. All right, let's see what's next. Oh, I just wanted to give a little plug for the law firm report card that we have available. Everybody will have an opportunity to download this at the end of the webinar, and it takes you through, allows you to kind of put in your basic metrics in terms of utilization, realization, collection, and overhead. It gives you a grade relative to a best-in-class firm, this research that we were talking about. And we also include some strategies you might use to improve that and how you can, and how that affects your grade. So
That's awesome.
we get a lot of good feedback on that. So give that a try. And I'm also happy to just have a little conversation with anybody if they want to talk further about profitability. And I'm sure Jared would be happy to as well.
I love it, man. Let's talk profitability all day.
All day, all day long. All right, now the next one is marketing. So what's your best advice about marketing?
So I have a lot of attorneys. Sorry, I'm laughing internally to myself thinking of conversations I've had recently. I think the biggest problem for lawyers in particular about marketing is putting themselves out there. Like they don't
Mm,
want to do it. And I think there's a couple reasons for that. One is like they just don't want to be like a lot of marketing is video marketing now,
hmm
and they don't want to be on video and they don't want to put opinions out there or thoughts because they're afraid of what people will say. And then the other big thing I hear from lawyers is I don't want to be a salesperson. Like every lawyer I've talked to who doesn't market, that I don't want to feel like a used car salesman. But that's you can market in ways that don't drive attention towards just you. And you can market in ways that aren't cheesy
right.
and do a good job with it.
hmm
So I think the first step for most people is a willingness to commit to marketing on a consistent basis, because that's really what this is about. And if a starting point is like, I've had a LinkedIn account for like 5 years and I've never posted anything, like let's commit to posting something once a week just to get
hmm
reps, just to see what kind of engagement you get. Because on a platform like that, 90% of the people are just lurkers. They're not posting anything. They're
Right.
putting together content. They're reading content that or viewing content that other people are putting together. But
Right.
it's not like I think a lot of people think like, oh, I got if I'm going to do this, I got to be a quote unquote thought leader, and the bar for that seems really high. It's really not. Like
hmm
the bar is like putting stuff out there, really. So
Well, not
yeah,
everybody is putting videos of talking llamas on the on their
I
LinkedIn
mean,
pages.
that's what makes me unique. But you don't
Exactly.
have to be like, you don't have to, you can graduate to talking llamas. You don't have to start with talking llamas.
Yeah,
So I tell people all the
that
time,
is a
just put
very
some
high
stuff out
bar.
there, see what
Yeah.
happens.
hmm I like that. Awesome. So I'm gonna be a little bit of a contrarian on this one. My
Uh-oh.
best
All
piece of
right.
advice on marketing is think twice before you swipe your card. Uh,
That's fair.
and you need to be really ruthless about your ROI on your marketing, especially if you're going to start to get into paid
Oh,
marketing
sure.
of
Yeah.
various kinds. I mean, networking and doing the kinds of things you're talking about is, I mean, that's lawyers' bread and butter, and that's cheap, and you know it costs you your time. So obviously guard it carefully, but um, it's you know it's the way most lawyers get their clients, and really even if you're a B2C type of law firm, you still should be developing referral relationships with especially one to many kinds of relationships. You know, I'm a PI firm. I develop a relationship with the business firm that doesn't want PI cases, so I get all their referrals, you know,
Oh,
and maybe,
absolutely.
you know, so, you know, that all of that makes sense. But once you start getting into, you know, hiring an agency and doing pay per click, and especially these days, I mean, it's so hard to get a return on that. So I
Yes.
don't know what your experience is with people trying to get into that world, but I think um, that requires some really careful thinking that we probably don't have time to get to today.
We could start it. Well, I say two things. Like one thing I would say is I think a lot of people look at like networking, um, content production, and dissemination as like no cost marketing. And as you said, that's not exactly true. Like
Mhm.
there's time you spend doing that.
hmm
Sometimes you're paying for things. Like even if you go to a networking event, maybe you buy somebody a drink, maybe you pay for parking. You've got 2 hours where you haven't been able to bill. Like there are actual real costs to that. The thing is that most people don't track those, so they're
Right.
not aware of those. But you could track those things and develop a return on investment model for that. Paid advertising, you know, totally different animal. And outside of personal injury law firms, like I don't know, there are not a lot of law firms that are aggressive about paying for advertising. So the two things I would say here is that I usually, if you're gonna delve into like the paid advertising and you're looking at digital marketing agencies, I would vet them fairly aggressively, and
Hmm.
I would at least talk to three organizations, and I would get proposals from each of them. And usually, and this is not, I'm not slamming digital marketing agencies. Like this is true of a lot of businesses. Like a lot of times, the proposals you get are not really drilling down on what they're going to do for you, but it's kind of a pep talk about how great they are. But
Right.
you want to figure out like what specific things are going to happen. How are those things going to be measured on an ongoing basis? And you want to ask specific questions about that because that may not
Hmm.
be included in proposals yet. So you really need to drill down on that and figure that part of it out. And the second thing about this is like it's harder and harder now to say like just do SEO for me, quote unquote. Because I mean
Exactly.
the search engine stuff is changing rapidly. Like Google is massively leaning into content now, especially organic content. And people are not using traditional search engines. I mean, they're still using them regularly, but there's inroads being made by tools like Perplexity, which is an AI based search engine. And then if you look at Google in particular, like they have an AI mode available now
Hmm.
where you can search using AI. They have an AI overview, which is pulling organic content and placing it above traditional advertisements. Google, as we know it, is going away. Like Google's going to be an AI search engine too. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah.
So you can do a lot more in terms of content production, directory profiles, and social media than you could even in the past. And that was still pretty effective. So I think if you're going to use a digital marketing agency, I'd vet them heavily. And I'd also look to see how broad their approach is. Because it's not just about necessarily anymore like, oh, let me do a PPC campaign or whatever, and that should take care of everything.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and at the same time, there are a lot of traditional approaches that I have never seen produce a lot of return, like branding.
Yeah.
Like for the most part, law firms do not have brands. The lawyers within the firm may have brands,
Yes.
but so the law firms like Unilever, nobody knows what Unilever makes. But when you say Dove soap,
Right.
Hellman's mustard, Ben and Jerry's, oh, now I know who they are. But nobody, so if you're branding Smith and Jones, apart from their personal practices, you should be branding the lawyers inside in their particular niches and being very targeted.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Now I'm hungry.
So we got
Forgot
a
about helmets.
few more minutes to go. Any other thoughts on marketing?
So the thing that's interesting too is that so you talked about the branding piece of it, and like most law firms are not necessarily focused on branded search, but that can be pretty effective as well.
Hmm.
Especially like searches for the names of individual attorneys. Like there's no rule that says you can't throw some advertising dollars after that too to
Hmm.
expand your reach
Hmm.
there, and that's not a bad use of funds either. I'll make
Interesting.
a plug for brand names though. I feel like if you're a law firm and you're a smaller law firm,
Hmm.
um, create a brand name which says something about what your practice does. Like
Other
I
than somebody's name,
right,
right?
which says nothing about what you do. But like I
Yeah.
work with some personal injury firms, for example, and the first thing I always do is like, let's throw injury into your name just to brand it. Like
Hmm.
so and so injury law. Like that tells people what you do. And people like legal consumers, they don't grasp that necessarily.
Yeah, I like that. That's a really good e- exception to the rule on in terms of branding a firm name. Put
Yeah,
it
but how
right
could
in
you
the
brand
name.
a firm name with like 17 different people's names that are extremely hard to pronounce? Like Ben and Jerry's, that's memorable.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
like,
it's true.
four or five lawyers' names are hard to remember. So think of a brand name, even if it's a whimsical one.
Fair enough. Yeah, I like it. All right, let's go. Let's talk data.
Okay.
What's your best insight on data for law firms?
Oh man, like I think law firms are still pretty behind on the data
Yeah,
front,
yeah.
honestly. Like you look at every other industry, like you look at sports, finance, anything else you could look at. They're so data heavy at this point, and lawyers just are not. Like we were talking about before, there's like built-in tools that you can use, all kinds of software, right? And they're not even clicking on the most basic reports. So I think there is a long way to go here. So for lawyers, like I think they could start with the stuff that's available in system to them.
Mm-hmm.
You were talking about utilization rates before. Like there's probably a
Mm-hmm.
built-in report in one of your products or several of your products that you use. Check that out. Realization rate, collection rate. Just start on the basic financial stuff. But beyond that, like when I work with firms, I like to develop metrics both to measure how efficient the law firm is and also to create incentives for people in the firm that are non-traditional incentives.
Mm-hmm.
And that starts with looking at like what your firm needs. And I focus specifically on, okay, this is a certain type of firm. What do you want out of the firm and what is not happening? Because what we really want to do is create metrics around how to get that stuff to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So it could be really simple or it could be really complex. But I'll give you an example. Like if I have a firm that's an estate planning firm and I know that they get paid when the initial meeting happens and the signing meeting happens, then we set goals around those meetings, right? We need 10 of each every month to make money.
Okay.
That's
Mm.
a KPI,
Right.
but law firms don't think of it that way. But to be able to track that effectively, you need to have a way to surface that data for yourself.
Love that one. Yeah. Yeah, I think there's definitely a place for that. I mean, my data point is keep it simple
Oh
because
yeah.
most law firms are really in a pretty rudimentary place, like you mentioned. So, most of the law firms we work with, if they can understand their WIP build collected and have good data around that, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
If they do that
Yeah.
well, okay, you're getting the bills out and getting them paid. That's a good foundation. Beyond that, I think it's our report card metrics are it's I found that to be really good for issue spotting in a
Hmm.
firm. Like,
Yeah.
okay, your utilization rate is in the tank. You need to get, you
Which
need more
it
work.
usually is
Yeah, exactly.
if
I'm
you're not looking
stunned
at
at
it.
the industry statistics for utilization rates. It's like
Oh yeah.
45% average for a mid-sized firm. What? I would have, I can't imagine that in any firm I worked in. But, if you
I know.
understand your capacity, your utilization, realization, collections, and your overhead as a percentage of revenue, you should be able to understand where you've got problems in your firm. Then you can, as you dive in, like, oh, my trust and estates firm has a utilization problem, and we've diagnosed that as being a problem with client acquisition.
Right.
Now let's focus on that. So that's like the next level down. But it's pretty hard to find those firms that are ready for that, don't you think?
Oh, for sure. Oh,
Yeah.
it's funny. I tell people if you're not tracking it, it's probably bad. So you should look at it to figure out what your baseline is.
I like that one. I like that. That's
But I
something a
think,
talking fox would say.
yeah, exactly. I wish I still had the filter on. Um, but I tell people all the time, like the way I try to ease people into it is I say, like, okay, we don't have to, we don't have to do anything beyond getting the data. So let's just see what the baseline is. And usually people see that and they're like, oh, I don't like that. Or I don't like this. Or this is really
Hmm.
bad. Then we can
Yep.
start to build on that. Like one of the things I taught to, I try to get people to do revenue projections all the time. And I'm always like, hey, let's figure out what your average case value is. And that's a fun exercise for me because people always overestimate what that number is,
Oh,
inevitably.
yeah. Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, so so clearly what you're telling me is not true. So let's get some numbers in place and see what it actually is, and then build out real revenue projections. But this is like the biggest law firm problem. Like everything is ad hoc.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's hard for a lot of law firms to, because many of them do not have repeatable, everything's a little bit unique, which is
Right.
probably part of the problem as well as on the profitability side, among other things. So we've got about 5 minutes left. Let's drop into our last topic,
Okay.
which is automation.
Hmm.
Um, so what do you have to say about automation?
Do it
What's your
aggressively.
best piece of advice? Do it. Do
um,
it.
I would say that you need to know what your starting point is. So
Uh-huh.
having automations presupposes you have workflows. Maybe you don't, or maybe your workflows need some work. So what I start with when I talk to people about automations is like, let's look at the process for everything. Like the law firms I work with that are most successful, they have processes in place for everything they do.
Hmm.
Case workflows, intake workflows, administrative workflows. They have workflows on how to close a file, like put everything together. And then once you have that worked out in a highly granular way, like people hate talking to me about workflows because I'm like, what about this? What about this? And what about this? Um, then you can figure out, oh, okay, like this part doesn't have to be done by someone. This part can be done by something, whether it's a standard form technology or
Hmm.
whether it's an AI tool. And that's the first step for me. So if you don't have workflows, start building them. Or if you do have workflows, start to analyze them with an eye toward what of this is rote that I could use a technology tool for so that I can free the people on my team up to do higher value work.
Love that. Yeah. Yeah, my thought on automation is similar, which is it's really about people more than technology.
Yeah.
And it's about, if you've got your people lined up. I mean, I know firms that are, very efficient and profitable that are not very technologically adept. And I would probably put my own in that spot. But they were pretty good at some key processes.
Mm.
So just being organized and having a decent process makes up for a lot. But I mean, these days there are many more opportunities to make that more and more automated, and
Right.
love to see more firms doing that. Um, yeah,
And I
the
guess
other,
like the yeah, go
go
ahead,
ahead.
go ahead.
One other thought, which is um, that. Uh, come keep it simple comes to mind here, that you don't, if you take on all of the processes in your firm at once, you're probably going to get bogged down and have failure and create problems. So pick your battles, pick something important, have some success. I think that's where I've seen the most success in kind of improving process.
Yeah,
What's your
that's a great point.
experience?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess one of the things I wanted to mention as I was listening to you talk is like, you know, going back to what we initially talked about, the AI part of this thing, like AI tools are awesome at creating workflows. So if you're like,
Yeah,
what do I even need to
exactly.
do? I don't know. Like, pop it into an AI. Or if you've already
Hmm.
got a workflow, you can have an AI analyze it and say, oh, what parts of this could be automated and give me specific ways that could be automated using specific technologies. Like, that's a
Right.
great key for AI.
Yeah, exactly.
And AI is also really good about next best action. So you say, okay, I've got a workflow. I'm about three-quarters of the way through. What are the things I should do next? So
Mm,
that's another great way to approach this.
I
And
love that
that's
one.
kind of like
Yeah.
using AI as like a second mind or a second
Hmm.
brain, which some people try to do.
Yep. All right. Well, we're just about out of time. Rachel had a question, which is, or at least a request that she'd love to
Mm.
hear more about how you identify case value.
Me too, Rachel. I hear you. Um, I don't know if you have thoughts on this. Obviously, feel free to jump in. It's your webinar. But I think that this is mostly a reporting question.
Mm,
So if you're like, some of this is, if you're a flat fee firm, like some of this is relatively easy. And you just look to
Right.
see, okay, is my expectation, is it meeting reality? If it is, if it's an hourly firm, there's maybe more data to collect because you have to figure out, okay, how many
Yeah.
hours do we work on average on a litigation matter? And what is the billable rate? And is it like a blended billable rate? Like are their associates
Hmm.
working? Are their partners working? But looking at a high level and figuring out, okay, if I have an estate plan and a trust, how much does that get me on average?
Right.
Versus if I do an antitrust litigation, what is the general value of a case like that?
Yeah.
Then you can get as granular as you want here, but then you can start piecing things together to come up with revenue projections, and that's a really helpful way of generating more revenue within your firm because you actually have a goal to hit. Most
Love
people
it.
don't have any goals, so they just make the same amount of money year over year.
Yep. Yep. Awesome. Well, we've reached the top of the hour.
It was fun.
So thank you, Jared. This was a blast.
Thank you.
And hope to see you as an avatar sometime soon.
I'll come back. I'll be another animal. You just let me know.
Sounds good. Thanks all. Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.